if we're a small group still, I'm also happy to give everybody a minute or something to introduce themselves. Edgar, for example, you're very welcome since you're immediately turned your camera on.
You want me to start?
Please do, and maybe even let us know what brings you here or what you hope to get from these meetings, because we're still deciding a little bit on what we want to do for the next ones.
Okay, so my name is Edgar Kampers. I am in the community currency world since ages, 1993, I'm old. And in the blockchain space since 2015, where we started to do consultancy around energy and blockchain and how to do that. So that led to several initiatives, and we recently got European funding. Recently is still needs to come in for a project where we are going to tokenize kilowatt hours from solar panels, windmills, batteries, whatever. So we can run virtual power plants with secure elements. So we use these things as crypto anchors, and the software that we are going to build will also allow for the tokenization of ownership of companies. In this case, the companies that own energy hubs or energy communities, and of the governance of it. Governance is, I think, the topic for today. So we work in with HiFiDAO, which is a different blockchain. But since we also did Stellar-related stuff earlier, I thought, let's have a look.
Oh, very, very perfect topic as well. I have a lot of friends who are adjacent to the community currency space, at least. So my heart goes there.
There might be overlap because that world is relatively small, huh?
It
the amount of academics and practitioners that are there for a long time and did a lot is, I mean, a few hundred, and then you had it.
Yeah. And a couple of them are currently in Liège, I believe, in Belgium. Mm-hmm. And then a couple of them will come back to Austria for the Crypto Commons gathering end of August as well.
So you're really close. So my friend organized the thing in Liège. I was not there.
Nice.
I stepped out, by the way, after a lot of, so I was there for a long, long, long time in a very active role, and I decided not to be there for a while. Let it develop. It's a difficult space, and it's very, very, very. So if you try to change the money paradigm in a capitalistic world, then you're always fighting sort of everybody. Because a good community currency is not based on greed nor on scarcity, and suddenly you are in deep trouble, because that are the only two drivers that are motivating us within the world as we know it. So I thought, let's do something else. And the reason why we are in energy communities is because that's the first part of the capitalistic economy that is more efficient on a local scale, regional scale, distributed scale than it is in a centralized way. So let's start there. Maybe that's more practical than these community currencies where we need to help our communities, and it doesn't really work because everybody has other things to do, families to raise, jobs to have, parents to take care of, whatever. Yeah.
Fully agree. And also,
nice
luckily for you, nice to have you. And luckily for you, we are not building Stellar exclusive governance, but our goal is to build chain agnostic or even non-chain governance mechanisms. So we're definitely looking to other use cases or people who might be able to benefit from them as well.
So I'm curious to see what's happening. Looking forward to it.
Rohan, do you want me to share first, or do you want me to go off your slides for the introduction?
Do you have slides?
I do have one or two.
Oh, then you can go with that. Yeah, I'll share it after. Yeah.
Where am I?
So Jeff's here. Jeff, I might pull you in for some slides. I hope you have good audio.
Hey guys, yeah, how's it coming through? How's my background noise?
No,
is it okay?
Pretty good. Yeah. I can
Great. I'm just at ETHCC Eigenlayer and HATS protocol boat party, so I apologize if there's any music in the background, but I think I'm far enough away. It shouldn't be a disruption.
All right, show us the party at some point. But yeah, okay, we can start.
And we just talked about Liège as well, where you just came from. So Perfect timing.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
But let's get started. So for today, I'm only going to give a brief introduction of where we're coming from, what Blockscience is, why we're doing this, and also what the governance modules library aims to be or what our goals are. And then I'm going to hand it off to Rohan for more in-depth talking. And hopefully towards the end, we also get some time to discuss as well. So as some of you already know, we started this project about a year ago, primarily around Neural Quorum Governance. So at Blockscience, we're an engineering firm. We do complex systems engineering, which for us fits into very different categories and where we apply engineering. Obviously, we do governance projects from research in ethnography, but also to actually engineering voting mechanisms. As an example, we will talk about conviction voting today, for which a lot of our members have, let's say, driven forward the research on that area quite substantially. But then also we do engineering projects in various other fields, from layer 2 technologies and decentralizing layer 2 solutions to also layer 1 applications, etc. We do pretty much a wide span of market design, mechanism design, but various areas in technology, economics, and social sciences in general. Today, a couple of our members are here. I'm going to give a brief intro to them. I don't know if they want to introduce themselves, but we've got Hash here, who's one of our engineers working on community management. We've got Christine here, who's managing this project for us. We've got Jeff, of course, who's an old head at Blockscience and does pretty much everything and has driven forward conviction voting research substantially. And also Rohan, one of our engineers, who will present the bulk today. So today, I'll give a brief intro first, and then Rohan will talk about a couple of different topics, the GML in general, different governance mechanisms, conviction voting, which we chose to create a chain agnostic spec for the module library for this project phase. And then Rohan will also give some overviews of Neural Quorum Governance, which is the mechanism that we built collaboratively with SCF over the last year. We're using this also as a bit of a segue to our next meeting, which will probably happen towards the end of July, where we will do a fireside chat of a couple of SCF folks. Anki will be there, Artur, who has worked on the implementation of NQG, and then from the Blockscience team, I will be there, Rohan will be there, and Danilo, who has been on the project from the beginning and has created a lot of the specifications, but also the monitoring and post-evaluation pipeline. So just as a quick intro before I hand it off to Rohan, why are we doing this? So when we do governance research, there's obviously a couple of different venues to address these, from MetaGov to other communities. What we were missing as an engineering firm was a chain agnostic library that doesn't necessarily provide an implementation ready set of code for people, but enough research, both learnings and also benefits and downsides of specific governance mechanisms, so that everybody can contribute to that research, but also use that research for their applications. So this is meant as a collaborative research exercise where we invite anybody to help contribute, but also we're looking for maintainers. So since we're doing this in a GitHub repo where we want to collect different modules, eventually push to Gitbook when they're ready, we're inviting anybody to help us in maintaining these, rolling through items through different research stages, but also to contribute with their own module ideas or with their research on existing module research. So initially we included, of course, NQG, Neural Quorum Governance, and its subpart quorum delegation. And then we provided a preliminary spec for a tier-based role certifier. And now for this phase, we are working on conviction voting and likely osmotic governance, where the naming is a bit of a up in the air, but it's another module that we want to add to it. The overall benefits that we're hoping to get from this is cross-chain collaboration on research, both from social science researchers, but also from developers, and especially also from people who are actively building applications, building infrastructure in the field. This is a bit of a long-term goal for us to get an active community that researches and provides implementations, at least as toy models or simulations, or maybe even a Rust implementation that can be used on Stellar and other blockchains directly. So with this, I'm going to hand it off to Rohan and stop sharing.
Okay, let me share my screen, I guess. Let me know if it's visible.
Yes.
Okay. So, wait. Yeah, okay. So I guess we skipped over agenda. Yeah, we're here. I would say like I could point out the governance module library, the current version of it, and you can actually, the links are all in the Miro. I will probably send this link to the group, so anyone can open it. I can probably put it in the chat. Yeah.
Also, one quick second, because we forgot again when everybody joined. We're recording this meeting. If anybody has issues with a recording, please let us know. But we will upload this to our Stellar project page as well, so that other people can watch it later.
Yes,
sorry, Rohan.
event is being recorded with the exclamation mark here. So yeah, basically, we went through all of this. Basically, the way I wanted to at least go through the explanation of why we are building this was I thought about like the current landscape of the governance that exists. Whenever I have these conversations with people, more often than not, there's a question of, okay, why are we making such complicated voting mechanisms? Like, why not just everyone have like one vote? Like, isn't that fair? I think there's a misunderstanding of what fairness is, and I feel like it's worth it for a tiny bit to actually understand why we need different voting mechanisms, why different communities require different specifications, and how having this modular approach in the governance module library will actually help us plug and play or almost build this biodiversity of voting mechanisms that we can build complex systems out of. I would say that a bunch of, I mean, in some sense, you could think of voting systems as a set of collective rules that we adhere to elect either policies or people. So this could be, again, deciding on a person who's representing us, or it could be like the policies, like which projects actually get funding, any of that. I would say that some of them we are very familiar with, like everyone having one person, one vote. That sounds pretty natural. Token weighted voting or $1 one vote is another way to show preferences, and this has been like done pre-blockchain. The benefit of blockchain technologies and communities like DAOs is that we have this technological layer now in which we potentially can create these computational ways of voting, in which we can make the aggregation of votes easier. We can probably compute votes differently. We could change the time scales on which we compute stuff. There is a whole layer of, I guess, ease that has come in voting, and we can probably think of much more complicated and better voting mechanisms that suit the communities that need them. I think quadratic voting is something most people might be familiar with, but it's again a very fascinating voting mechanism that actually solves for the problem between one person, one vote, and $1 one vote. And we could go through some of them. I think the way I was thinking about like again going through governance as like what is like why are we deciding on these voting mechanisms? A very interesting aspect of it is that you could think of it from a signal processing lens, where what we're trying to do at the end of the day is you have all these people in your community. They all have preferences. These preferences change over time. They are time varying. They are continuously changing. They are distributed. Not all. We have no access to knowledge about what a person is thinking at any point. And we need to aggregate all of this into some yes or no. Does this policy get passed or not? Does this does this project get a grant or not? And when we're trying to like squash all of this complexity into like a yes or no question, a lot of times a lot of nuance and I think the richness is lost in the process. So to think about what governance is actually best for your system, you probably want to think through like who decides these collective rules? How often do we decide these rules? How do we collect the preferences of these voters? How often do we collect these preferences? All of these could be something that there's no one what is that called? One size fit all solution. And there was a very fascinating web page that I came across, and I feel like this actually explained to me, or at least visually explains the idea of voting very beautifully. Where let's say you have this landscape where there are two policies, or let's say people that you're trying to vote for, and the small ones are the votes, are the voters. The closer they are to the policies of the voters, that's where they prefer to vote. So if that makes any sense, like you can visually see that the closer the small yellow circle is to the triangle, and vote for the triangle. If it gets close to the square, votes for the square. What's fascinating about this is you can actually simulate a bunch of like very interesting ideas. Like for example, if you look at democracies, in which we have the one person one vote system generally, in which all our votes, like I have a bunch of candidates I could vote for, but at the end of the day, I have to say that I have to choose one candidate at the end of the day for to vote as a president, let's say. And uh, the idea which can be conveyed through this is that you can have a system where can you guys still hear me, by the way? My battery is low.
Yeah.
Okay,
Fine.
good. Okay. So I was thinking, I don't know if this example makes sense, but this is what made sense to me, which was that if you remember the 2016 elections in USA, that was the first time I was actually politically active in at least reading about the US elections. And what I realized is you can think about the system like this. You have, let's say, Hillary Clinton, who's the square. You have Bernie Sanders, who's like this hexagon, and you have Donald Trump, right? What ends up happening is even though that if you count the number of votes, like for example, if you count the number of people who want square to be the winner, 47, the number of people who want the hexagon to be winner are 26. So when you count them in total, there are more people who would rather prefer square or hexagon in total, but somehow triangle still wins. And that's because you end up splitting the votes between the candidates that are similar. Because we only have one vote to give, we can't express our preferences as saying that, hey, I would first want, like, let's say square. Secondly, I would want hexagon. And the last option I want is triangle. That's what most people would have chosen in some format, but that's not who ends up winning. And this web page is beautiful. It actually goes through a bunch of alternatives of voting mechanisms that exist. Why do they exist? Why we have different, like how can we potentially change this voting mechanism that ends up creating two-party systems? A lot of times, I feel like I had a misunderstanding that the reason two-party systems come up is because of just monopolies or like all kinds of like other things in politics. But it seems like our voting mechanisms, the way we've decided how to aggregate votes, has a huge role to play in how the systems end up performing and what kind of dynamics play out. Almost every like one person, one vote voting system kind of devolves into this two-party system in almost every country that you see. And it's a feature of the voting mechanism we've chosen, not the people and their choices. And I feel like if we understand that, we can actually understand that there are different ways in which we can aggregate votes. It's not that everyone gets one vote. You could have some way of like maybe ranking, maybe 3-1. Like you can say whose preferences, like what candidate you prefer the most in an order. Maybe you can give them a score in which you can actually even express your I guess weights of preferences rather than just the order. There are many ways we can do this. I would say that since we have the technology to build things like this with much more ease than we ever did before, it's interesting to go through the ideas that can come out of this. governance is adaptive. This is something I wanted to express, that a very similar kind of model. There's a video here which actually explains why different voting systems have issues that they do, or the flaws that exist, like the spoiler effect or the center squeeze effect. And these are things that you can actually visualize and see, and you can decide for your community actually what are the flaws that we potentially see our voting system having, and what do we want to avoid. Every voting system will have some flaw or the other, and there could be always probably better choices than others for your particular voting system. I don't know if Jeff is still here, but I think I wanted to shout out one of the coolest books that I've read this year, Mycofy, and it's this book basically encompasses the ideas of how mycelium networks, or like I guess like how governance in some sense exists in nature, and how decision making exists in nature, and how you can actually learn different voting, different kind of subsidiarity voting mechanisms that we can actually aggregate into systems that we are building right now. Jeff, do you have any? If you can unmute, I would love to hear your thoughts on how mushrooms
definitely.
come into play.
Am I coming through okay?
Yes, perfect.
Great. Yeah, no, I just wanted to double click on a few things you were saying. I love those visuals, by the way, and I think, you know, moving towards more polycentric governance systems, we can have aggregates. You know, we can say this person's or this type of vote is worth twice as much, this type of vote is worth half as much. I mean, we can do that. But I think also just having the pluralism of those multiple dashboards, you know, being able to say this is the ranked choice outcome or the yes/no outcome based on one person, one vote. This is based on, you know, a technocratic, we gave all the experts the tokens. Here's one based on liquid democracy. Here's one where the funders got the say. This is actually a common way in DAOs, right? You put the one who puts in the most money, has the most tokens, gets the most say. So let's put that up there along with all the others. You know, here's one that it's geographically weighted. The people who are closest to the problem have the most say. The further away you are, you have a demurrage basically over your governance say. So yeah, I'm really interested how we can, you know, and if we look at that and we say, okay, in 7 of 8 of these scenarios, everyone agrees this is the best outcome, except this one where the funders say we should do that. Okay, cool. Then we know the funding is the problem. And we should listen to everyone else. And I mean, I'm creating a totally hypothetical, definitely not real world scenario. But I think this is a really interesting opportunity to, you know, lift our governance mechanisms, not even have one governance mechanism to rule them all, or even one aggregate, but aggregates of aggregates and all of the different, you know, signals that are relevant to the community, not just economic either. Well, I mean, we're here talking about governance, but these are all just data flows essentially. So yeah, really interested how we.
Okay, I think you're cutting off.
I really like what you said about the biodiversity. That's what we're looking for at this stage. Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah. Biodiversity of tools. Sorry, my Wi-Fi might not be great.
Yeah, okay, I can take it up from here. But I guess that is the thing. I think I'd heard Z and Jeff talk about this in one of the Greenbill podcasts, where they were discussing how thinking about the systems that we are building, communities that we are building, as a biodiversity of different modular systems, like where different voting mechanisms exist, different economic mechanisms exist, different socio-economic systems exist, and seeing how they, I guess, build together, work together, where they break is the best thing we can do with Web3 right now, where we can actually see which mechanisms stand the stress of time, maybe which ones are resilient, which ones don't work, and building a modular library for governance is probably one of the best steps we can take to enable communities to be able to plug and play some of these ideas on the governance side of things, at least. This actually very easily flows into conviction voting, because this was an idea which kind of, I mean, in some sense, I feel like it has a lot of analogies to nature, where you can think about voting not as, let's say, just a one-day event where like you just go to the booth and you put the vote. But in fact, you could think about voting as aggregation over time, where as preferences are changing over time, people can be allowed to move their votes from one project to another. And you can actually, instead of having a singular day where the votes are aggregated, you can actually have votes being accumulated over time. So like you can have, you can change your votes, you can decide how many votes you want to distribute to different projects. And these votes basically flow into the total vote that the project gets from different people. And as it reaches a threshold, maybe the proposal passes. So this is a very interesting way in which you can have this continuous preference aggregation thing. You can also solve for a very legitimate problem, which is that in a lot of times when we have a singular day when the proposals are being passed, maybe people would put their votes saying that, hey, I want to vote here. Like maybe some person with a lot of votes, let's say we are weighting people's votes to, some whale with a lot of votes could say that, hey, I'm going to vote for project A. And on the last day, they just switch to project B. And this changes the outcome of the entire process. And this ends up having the unfortunate, I guess, situation where like there's information asymmetry between most of the people and the person who has the most votes. Solving for a problem like this could be something conviction voting can solve. Like, so if this is the problem that your community is facing, where you want a clear knowledge about which projects are getting how much vote and where the preferences are, maybe conviction voting is one of the best ways to do it, where you're aggregating your votes over time, almost like integrating like a capacitor. And as the conviction reaches a threshold, you end up executing the proposal. There are multiple variations on this idea. So we already have like, let's say, some implementations of this in OneHive. In fact, I could, if I figure out how to open this, yeah, this should work. The idea is that once we think of, let's say, something like conviction voting, and we build one of these modules on the governance module library, if we can build a CAD version of it, if we can build, let's say, a digital twin representation of how this mechanism will work, we can actually run many kinds of scenarios. And this is something, this is one of the arrogant conviction voting models that was built by Blockscience earlier, where you can see how it is converted into a mathematics specification, eventually into, and we can run different kind of networks. We can actually see how the project is actually voting on live, which proposals is actually going on. And you can do this level of data analysis, which again, normal voting systems just did not have in the past. Like there's the amount of information that we're capturing, the amount of information that we are relaying to the aggregation side of things, and actually being able to communicate to the communities about how preferences are changing, how projects are getting approvals, at what rates are they getting approvals. This is a very fascinating way to actually study your system, study your communities, understand their preferences. And the idea is that if we build all of these governance mechanisms and build like these digital twin systems of them, where projects are like can change the parameters and study how it would work in their own system by changing some of the parameters, by changing some of the experiments that they run before they actually implement it. This could be a way in which you could actually build almost like flight simulators. Like you can actually, without taking the risk of putting it in your community, you can run some experiments before you put them there to make sure that they're robust enough. Another very interesting idea. Also, how much time do I have, Jacob? Like, how do we want to distribute the rest of the time? Because I can
Use
decide
as
how
much time
deep.
as you feel free. You can decide, yes.
Okay, fine. So yeah, so we also have the implementation of neural governance. I guess this is something that we can talk in depth, because this is actually something that we implemented in Stellar Community Funds, and we've seen the progress of it over time. The general idea, the deeper idea behind like why we need neural governance is basically there are a lot of people within your community, and all these people, let's say some have some expertise in coding, some have some expertise in decision making, some have expertise in design, and there are a lot of kinds of decisions that a community has to make at times. And maybe some way of certifying or tagging people could be a thing that you need in order to give votes different preferences. So for example, you could have these reputation badges or like some kind of like expertise badges where these could be NFTs where like depending on how many GitHub contributions you've done, you could possibly get a higher weight on your vote for some kind of technical proposals. You could think about reputation as maybe, or you can think about voting history. Like voting history is, you can think of it as a neuron, which for every person weights their particular votes more if you have voted in your previous rounds. This could incentivize participation in your in the rounds. This could incentivize, in some sense, contributions and building like these NFT certification routes to actually be able to tag people with different expertise and different kind of involvements or how long they've been in the system and rewarding them for it. Also with the logic being that someone who's been in the system long enough would probably know more about the community and therefore they should have a higher say. So if you ever think of you wanting to weight people's votes differently, we've built neural governance as a module within governance module library where you can, in some sense, plug this in your system, and people's default vote powers can be weighted by these tags that you decide and aggregated layer by layer, where you can have multiple layers where here you just have reputation and voting history, but you can also have trust. Let's say you want to weight people's vote more based on how much the community trusts them. So you give them maybe a UI interface where people can choose who they trust in the community and then weight the trust more that way. There's a lot of design space open in something like this, where we are weighting votes of people, or you could also weight vote for like projects differently, again, like depending on the class of projects. So there's a lot of design space that opens up the second you have neural governance. The other idea in the part of neural quorum governance that we had implemented was quorum delegation, which is that a lot of communities end up having this issue with like voter apathy, where like eventually at some point people stop voting as often as they used to. The voter turnout rate starts decreasing. You have in general, like there could be some proposals which require a lot of expertise in some technical space that is needed, and maybe most of the voters actually don't know what that particular project is about, and they don't have the relevant expertise to vote on it. Or it could be that many community members don't want to vote on every single proposal every single time. So quorum delegation could solve for that by allowing any delegating member, any member that wants to vote, to choose a quorum of their own, saying that, hey, these are the 5-6 people that I trust will probably know what is right. And I trust them to that whatever the average of their vote is I'm okay with passing my vote as the average of their vote. So like if 6 of them said yes and 2 of them said no, and some of them abstained, it'll pass as a yes because most people said yes. And you could decide like the thresholds here too. But the general idea is that you tally votes for quorums instead of making every single delegating member vote in every single round for every single project. You could potentially have some form of representation democracy, representative democracy. I guess India has like a system like that, but instead of choosing the people that, and we can't vote on every proposal that comes with the government. This would be more like you have a choice to vote if you want to, but you also have a choice to pass your delegation to someone else. And this could be, again, a very interesting mechanism to solve for the voter apathy problem that we have in communities. Putting this all together, you have the system where you can weight people's votes. You can weight them by their history and what they've done in the community. You can weight them by the expertise. You can weight them by their trust in the community. And you can think of other neurons that you potentially need that you can use to tag and weight different votes. But also you can have this delegation thing as a module that you can attach with the neural governance. So now you have a system which not only weights people's votes on every project, but also allows them to choose who they want to pass their vote to. If you look into the governance module library, can you all see the screen too, the module library?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So you can see the specification, the implementation instructions, guidelines. This currently may not be updated, I've not checked, but this is the general idea of like building this together where we can come as a community and set up all these modules which can be plugged and played together. And hopefully we can create like a much more like rich ecosystem of governance modules that can be put together. Yeah, and there is if anyone's interested and with any coding background, you can also look into the implementation that we have, the public implementation of the Neural Quorum Governance. Most of this is open source. You can see how we've run tests. We've studied the system. We've looked at every single round, what happened, ran what if scenarios, counterfactuals, if the parameters were different, what if we change the voting history and stuff like that. All these questions that you would have as what if scenarios is something you can experimentally run using these CAD files that we built. And okay, here we go. And Q&A. And I was told to remove this, but I didn't have time. So there we go. We have. So I'm done with most of my the sections of my presentation, but we can open it up to Q&A, or we could even discuss any particular slide if anyone's interested in the NQG implementation or quorum delegation that we are about to build now. Also nice to see you, Jose.
Hi.
Christine, do you maybe want to, maybe you could show the process with which people could contribute and start, adding issues or discussions in our library, if you're still up here.
Yeah, let me just pull that up in a minute, but
But yeah, I found these really fascinating, at least these visual explorations of why voting systems break, where do they fail, being able to understand how the spoiler effect happens, where you could have a candidate that comes in, and even though most people want these two, somehow the one that is the least liked ends up winning, which is quite a failure of a voting system if you think about it. And this is something that we are running entire like democracies on at this point. Thinking about even different voting mechanisms and visualizing them and why they like understanding why they would break in different situations is just beautiful to see in this kind of graphic. And I hope like with the CAD implementations, we could actually potentially build these spatial models too eventually. That'd be so fascinating to see, to run tests visually of where and how systems could fail. But yeah. Most of these links are on the Miro board, so anyone can open it and play around. Oh, look at that. And what's cool is you can actually decide the voting system here too. And I think this is also a very cool implementation that could be built once we have these modules that are read, where we can actually, the way Jeff explained, like we could choose which voting mechanism would work in this scenario and why the others would fail, or like, this would be so cool to visualize for every community. And if you have some idea of the experiment you want to run, you could just build it out. Like you have an entire module library to do it with.
So I have the links ready whenever
Should I stop sharing?
Yeah, I can go ahead
Okay.
and share. So I dropped them in the chat as well, but just on a meta level, Jacob and others have put in a lot of work kind of setting up this repo where we can have discussion threads. And there's kind of like two tracks. So one, you could make a discussion thread about the proposal process itself, which is kind of meta. So for example, I just made one where I was like, oh, this was my experience when I was filling out the proposal, and points of feedback that I had was, oh, maybe we can give an example, and maybe we can streamline some of the questions so that it's like a little bit easier and there's the right amount of friction. So that's like on a maintenance level, right? Because all systems for open source governance require maintenance. And then going back to whatever, not meta level, if we take the conviction voting module as an example, which Rohan and Jeff kind of delved into, this is an example of a template that Rohan, Hash, Jacob, and I put together, and it's on an open forum. So any of you could do this as well, and that could be really beneficial for the ecosystem. But basically, title, the proposer, and then a little bit of context on like, why would this governance module be useful? What is it? As well as a problem statement, which kind of hints at requirements, but it doesn't have to get extremely in-depth at requirements. And then what's the potential application? Like, what would your community use it for? And this is one of the, I think we technically call this like the in desire phase. So it's the phase where you don't have everything specced out, but you have identified like a need. So in the conviction voting example, it could be, okay, we're noticing that in our community, we want to be able to have a different preference aggregation mechanism that weights, you know, how long people have staked their opinion on this specific item. So that's kind of like flagging a need. And then we do have different phases of the proposals. So it's like in desire, in design, in development. There might be a few more, Jacob, feel free to jump in, but that's kind of like the overview, is that there should be some sort of process that's decently open for people to actually make these proposals.
And yeah, and everyone here is more than welcome to, if you all have any ideas, you'll have seen any kind of governance modules that you would want to add. Yeah, Jacob, sorry, I cut you off.
No, that was perfect, because that's pretty much what I want to say too. So the idea here is really to go through these different stages, and obviously we're an engineering firm, so some of these things might be initially a little bit over-engineered. That's also why we're very happy to receive feedback on how this works for other people. But one thing to keep in mind is that we're not trying to force people to go through all of these stages themselves, but we're essentially asking, hey, if you have an idea of what should be included here, post it as a what we call desire, something that could be interesting for others, that could be useful. And then other people can pick up in phases where they see themselves fit in very well. So some people like to implement stuff, some people like to create specifications, some people like to design and describe requirements, so that this can become a collaborative research effort. And then of course we can also pick up on any modules that we find we can contribute to. And similarly, we're very happy for others to contribute to modules that we're describing in there as well.
I mean, I know a bunch of people in this call as well, like Stella. I don't know if you can unmute, but she, like Stella, has a community of her own where like there are a bunch of like active community members, and they think through like different problems that they have internally. And I'm pretty sure, Stella, I think we were discussing in one of the Token Engineering Academy calls that there were potential governance mechanisms that you had thought of for your community. And it would be interesting. I mean, anyone with an idea could just like drop in one of the on the discussion forum to get started. You know, like we probably will find collaborators to start working on some of these new ideas, or maybe some old ones that we want to set up as modules to make it available for the community. Yeah, Stella, yeah, feel free to unmute your mic, by the way.
Hey, Roro. Good
hands.
to see you again. I feel like we haven't spoken in ages.
Yes.
Yeah, hi, everyone. Actually, Lutra is also here with us. We all met in the Token Engineering Academy. And we're right now walking through the token engineering canvas to actually evaluate a token for the Alana community. And our community is mostly, for the most part, it's creators. So it's not necessarily people who, you know, spend like most of their day thinking about governance. But they are quite excited to take part in decision making, right? And we've thought about very different models. We are applying right now a tiered model, but eventually we want to link this to a contribution calculator. So we're currently working on a contribution calculator that defines a range of task points for repetitive tasks, for administrative tasks, and for project-based tasks. And according to what people will essentially invest in working power into that system, the idea is that this will be also the amount of power they hold in the system. So actually, I never thought about conviction voting, for example, right, as a valid possibility for our specific community, but it makes a lot of sense. And if we can, I don't know if like I'm having a hard time understanding how we could potentially contribute to the system, to be honest. But maybe a little bit more hand taking, and we will get there, and are happy to share. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I could share a screen. So even I was trying to get there. Wait, let's open this. Yeah, I couldn't open here. I don't know what I'm sharing at this point. Are we seeing the discussions page?
Yes.
On the GitHub? Yes, okay. So I mean, you could, when you open the link that I've put on the chat, like it opens the discussions tab here on our SCF GML contributions page. And you can actually just literally add a new discussion saying that, hey, do you have a normal idea? Let's say idea, title, what is it? Work weighted something, I guess, and then add some of the context that you have. And maybe someone else who has some ideas, or the team currently, we could all just back and forth brainstorm on the discussion thread. So if we go back, you could actually see when we have one of the discussions that are put, we can actually have comments. We can start discussing ideas as to like how this could be implemented. Maybe if someone wants to build the cat version, the technical people can go in that direction. The people who have just want to collect ideas of different voting mechanisms could go and just start building maybe the discussion thread. Or would that be the right way, Jacob, or would it be that?
That is one of the ways. So absolutely, that is one of the easiest probably ways to contribute here. So if you just have an idea, we even have a template that you can fill in if you want. You don't have to have all of the information ready at this point. This is also when I talk about maintainers and contributors, there's essentially two ways to help this effort, I would say. So one is, of course, you can contribute ideas, you can contribute research to existing ideas, you can contribute code to maybe already well-specified ideas. So this is what I would call the research collaboration. And then what happens, or maybe as a little preface, there's three ways you can contribute an idea. You can go straight to the discussion and just add an idea there, as well specified or as little specified as you can do. But then there's also a Google form which follows the template where you just need to fill in the template, and then you can also just submit a pull request. Yeah, if you go back once, it describes the ways to contribute. So here, how to submit a new idea. You can create a pull request, or you can use the form, or as we now also use the discussion thread, you can just basically in text contribute how much information you already have, or as much as you already have. And then on the other hand, what will happen is that we have maintainers. Currently, that's Blockscience. We hope that this develops into a community effort where people feel that this is useful and where they are willing to join community calls, but also potentially help us maintain this. And this essentially means that we go through the discussion thread and look at whether the idea is well specified enough to what we call transition to the next funnel. So when we have a little bit of an underspecified idea. We call it a desire. Once that is sufficiently specified, we call it in design. There we would talk about requirements and start to create specifications. And then we would transition it over to in development, where we're primarily dealing with writing toy models, writing full-on simulations, or even writing implementations in Rust, in Python, etc. So there's ample ways where people can contribute. For now, I would say that we're trying to get people to join, give us ideas of how to make this more useful, where we can alleviate barriers, and to find the first people who are interested in this and want to collaborate with us, either on maintaining or on contributing itself.
Also, I can, knowing Stella for a while, I know her head is saying, wow, this is so poorly designed. If you have better ideas about how we can make the user flow better, please feel free to, because as a design person, I know the GitHub UI is probably not something that you would feel comfortable. Currently, that's the best way we've discovered. But even for those, like if you want to just put out the discussion and say that, hey, can we try this other method? Because I'm sure Alana as a community probably uses a bunch of ways to aggregate people's preferences. But yeah, I mean, like all of these are open to question and open to discussion. And yeah, I mean, whoever wants to join in the community, more than welcome. And I had oh yeah, we had to breadcrumb the next roundtable. I would, I mean, Jacob, if you can maybe pitch in, but NQG, like the Neural Quorum Governance that we had set up for SCF rounds, was probably is probably something that is a very adaptable system that many people should be able to plug and play into their own. And I feel like just thinking through, since you can weight people's votes, you can have this quorum element of like, if you have voter apathy as your problem in your community, you can actually allow people to delegate the votes to other people. And if you want to see how that implementation played out over the couple of rounds, how many rounds were there? I think around 6, Jacob, or was it? No, it was more, right?
Must have been 6 or 7.
Right. Yeah, 6 or 7 rounds where we actually went through the entire process of setting up the parameters, of deciding what should be weighted from the community, etc. I feel like it would be a fruitful discussion if you're interested in how the process played out. What did we find out along the way? There were a lot of like surprises that we found where things we thought were easy were probably not easy, and things we thought were hard were not hard. And I think a discussion with Danilo, Jacob, me, Anki, and Arthur will be pretty interesting. Even the implementation of sort of one, the Rust implementation, the Python tests that we ran, I think all of that will be discussed. Maybe charts and stuff like, yeah. So
maybe
yeah,
additionally, another addition for context as well. So the NQG development has been going on for quite a bit over a year by now. Initially, of course, a lot of design work, discussing with SCF and stakeholders on what is actually valued in that community, and coming up with a reasonably modular and adaptable framework that can change over time depending on community preferences. Now, over the year of 2023, a bulk of the work was first spent on designing this. Then, of course, the Stellar Community Fund implemented it on chain, or parts of it on chain, which is a discussion that we will be having next time as well, on some of the complications on implementing on-chain parts sometimes. And then over the course of 2024 so far, we built and operated a reporting and monitoring pipeline. So we analyzed every round. We built counterfactuals of what if you had set the parameters differently? What if you didn't have this part of the mechanism? What if you only use the one person, one vote system? So a lot of different things, and that gained us a lot of learnings. And these we want to share and have a discussion with the community at large. The entire process also came with a rise in voter numbers. So initially a rather small number that was then extended. Change in parameter values depending on learnings that we that we found out, but also changes in the implementation. So luckily, we will have a reasonably full house with a large part of the team that was present both from the very beginning of how did we get to this, why did we design it this way, which choices did we make, which solutions did we leave on the wayside for potentially later, but then also on the implementation side and on the stakeholders of the community, Anki and Artur. I'm very positive that the NQG roundtable will be a very fruitful discussion that can also help others learn from the experiences that we've had in both designing, implementing, and then monitoring this governance mechanism.
Yeah, and I feel like it's so, I feel like this is not spoken about enough, that this is a iterative process. And even after you implement something, the consistent steering of the parameters and making sure that it's actually matching what the community actually wants out of the mechanism. It was a fascinating experience. And I think that's something we don't talk about enough. Like, I think it's a lot of times governance is like, okay, we set this mechanism and that's it. Okay, it's fair, great. But the ability to steer the system when we have parameters like this would be so interesting as we go further and as more modules are developed and put together. You have some questions on the chat too. Do you think it will be a one voting model fits one community, or do we need to combine 2 or 3? That's a good question. And again, yeah, you could use one of the discussion topics to like maybe put that out, and I'm pretty sure the community will come in and start discussing that. I do think that for different within a community, it's possible that you would need more than one voting solution for different problems that you're trying to solve. Maybe like within a department or like a vertical of your community, you probably need a different kind of voting mechanism, but maybe for the external users and the people who are using your product, you would need different. I'm pretty sure depending on the exact situation, you could tweak the kind of voting mechanisms you use. But again, I would love to see people who've actually had experience with governing DAOs discuss the issues that come up and what kind of solutions they've internally found. Maybe currently there are manual solutions which we could automate. Like the design space is pretty open.
One challenge that often arises from having different modules is legibility for participants. So this is also a problem with conviction voting, which is a very elegant mechanism, and I like it very much, and I'm happy to do more research on it. But it does make it a bit harder for participants to understand what is exactly happening. And one thing, especially for high stakes decisions and high stakes governance situations, is that these more complicated voting mechanisms usually tend to be more beneficial for highly sophisticated actors, those with strategic preferences and those who can enact strategies in collaboration with others. So there's always a bit of a trade-off where also when we're designing mechanisms, it's very easy to go overboard and everything is a module and everything is super complex, but that can often go against legibility, which then drives voter apathy, which drives confusion. So I would say that for most communities, you should probably stick to a limited amount of different ways to vote. But obviously, if there are specific high stake decisions that need to be made, these can be set differently. And then one concept that we encounter very often, especially in blockchain systems and in new economies, in new markets, is that there are different modalities that you go through depending on the life cycle of the project, from a bootstrapping phase where traditionally often ecosystems disperse high amounts of block rewards, but those are not very sustainable. They just drive initial engagement. And then once you have network effects, you move to a different mode of the economy. And similarly, I would say that governance mechanisms should go through evolutions of different community sizes, different stakes for decisions, but also different costs of coordination within the community.
Okay, yeah. We are crossing the time, but yeah, thanks for joining in, everybody, and feel free to have these conversations. Danilo, you put up an article about min-maxing. Oh yeah, this is a very interesting article, a potential paper that's about to be published when QG is cited. I mean, I would suggest reading it too. Any other questions you can always put up in the discussions. I think as much as we can involve ourselves and have the discussion forum ready, I think where we are constantly having conversations there, I think it would be interesting to have this community get bootstrapped. But yeah, thank you, Edgar, for joining. Hey, Luca.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Rohan, for presenting.
I forgot to, Christine, I forgot to remove the final part that you scolded me for, but
It's
I
not
hope
a-
no one did it. But yeah. But it's true. I didn't have time for the conclusions. Right? I just like pushed it to Q&A. But yeah, thanks everyone. And see you all in the next community call. I think we probably will be sending out the invites on Twitter and LinkedIn. Do we also probably will we be sending emails too, since we have the community's information now, like at least the people who came in the first call?
We might do that. I think usually the easiest way to find it is on our project board on Stellar. We're gonna send tweets through the Blockscience account. We're gonna, maybe we can actually just ping people on their mails, but let's see how many we have, etc.
Yeah. Right. We can, if there are any questions, y'all can feel free to unmute, or otherwise we can shut the call. And Danilo, next time you will have to talk. We can't have you be muted all the time.
Yeah, I'll check next time.
Thanks all. Great presentation. That was so amazing. I'm really looking forward to the recording. Looking forward to get that up so I can share it. Great stuff. This was, I hadn't seen that Nikki case. I don't know how I missed that one. But I'm looking forward to digging in further. Thanks so much. We got to chat so much more about all this. I'm looking forward.
Yeah, in fact, Jeff, one of our first conversations was about some of this, like spatial modeling of governance mechanisms.
Yeah, I remember.
And
it's so exciting.
I didn't know that Nikki Case had done the exact same thing already. So I was actually planning to build it myself. New? That's what I'm wondering now. I think I opened it. I mean, I just saw it recently. So yeah, it would.
I would like
if
to.
he.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just responding to the chat as well. I would like to go to DWeb Camp. I don't know if the dates are going to work for me, but it would be awesome to catch up there. So.
All right, I guess we're good to go. Thanks everyone for
Wait
joining.
a second. Hey, this is Jay Carpenter. If I could say something. For those of you that might not know, there's going to be a free DWeb Camp event tonight at the Internet Archive. It's free. That starts at 5:30. There'll be dinner, free dinner, and then set presentations. But I know several of the people from MetaGov are going to DWeb Camp, and many of these topics are key parts of the community at DWeb Camp and so forth. So, FYI, the event's on Eventbrite if you're interested in attending, and I think you would find some interesting collaborators there. All right.
Okay. Thanks for sharing. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.
See you guys there. Right. Goodbye, guys.
Thanks. I'll catch you later.
Thanks all.